Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Buyer North. I'm Natalie McCrindle. As you can see, I am the Head of Procurement and Commercial for Social Security Scotland, and I'm here to talk to you today a bit about our new agency, which was established in 2018. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is who we are, our recently published procurement strategy, and I'll set out the commitments in that strategy. I'll also talk about working with supported businesses. Then I'll come on to talk about the work with the agency in the supplier development programme over the weeks and months ahead. So Social Security Scotland was recently established, well, fairly recently in September 2018. We are an executive agency. We are accountable to Scottish ministers, and our primary function is to deliver the benefits that transitioned to Scottish ministers under the Scotland Act 2016. So most of you might be aware, our headquarters are in our lovely shiny new building in Dundee, and you'll see a nice picture there. It's recently been confirmed that the building is called Agnes Husband House, and that's as a result of a competition for staff. So we have a second main site in Glasgow, that's at 220 High Street in the city centre. And in time, we will have local delivery representatives in all parts of Scotland. So in every single local authority in Scotland, there will be a presence for the agency to make it easy for people to access the services that we provide. And that's a key part of our commitment under the Social Security Act 2018. Okay, so let's talk a wee bit about the procurement strategy. Our procurement strategy was recently published in July. After much consultation, a huge amount of engagement, a lot of thought was put into that strategy. It's available on our website if anyone wants to have a look at what it says. A key commitment is that we will work with our contractors to improve our performance as an agency to make sure we run efficiently, and we will identify opportunities for working more sustainably in the long term with contractors. Clearly, a huge drive now on economic recovery post-pandemic, a huge drive on the economy and making sure that our activity, our end-to-end activity as an organisation is as carbon neutral as we can make it. One of the things we are obviously very keen to do is promote fair working practices in our supply chain, from the end-to-end supply chain, and support and maintain resilience in the supply chain, which I think has been particularly tested throughout the pandemic. Who could have, foreseen the pressure on supply chains that the pandemic would present? And finally, we have given very real commitments to increase transparency in our supply chain, which is of critical importance. So, as I've said there, we will adopt Fair Work First guidance. This is Scottish Government guidance. A lot of you will be familiar with it. The commitment is that we would expect or very much hope that suppliers would pay the real living wage. We look for commitments from suppliers to make sure that there's workforce representation, make sure that staff have the opportunity to have their views heard and they can feed back. And also, critically, things like the gender pay gap, what commitments are there within organisations to reduce that. So really, really important. If you need any more information about Fair Work First guidance, you will find that on the Scottish Government website. We have also signed, as an agency, the Scottish Business Pledge, and we will be looking to make sure that the commitments that we make under the Business Pledge are flowed down through our individual procurement strategies. We intend to work with stakeholders and suppliers to adopt a proportionate risk-based approach to contract management, which is obviously critical to make sure that we de-risk the post-award management of our requirements. And we intend to work very, very collaboratively with contractors to discuss how they can make sure that Scottish Ministers' expectations in relation to ethical supply chains and sustainable development are actually delivered through our contracts. And obviously, as suppliers, you are critical to help us become more sustainable. One of the things we are looking at just now is how we calculate the carbon footprint of the agency, how we make sure that we can report our carbon footprint. We're now bound in legislation to do that. And a critical part of that is understanding what part our contracting activity plays in carbon. So we will obviously be looking to to build our capability and build up the capability of our supply base to help us report that in due course. Okay, more about the procurement strategy now. We are really, really keen to make sure that we open up as much of our business to SMEs, so small to medium-sized enterprises, the third sector organisations and supported businesses. It's a very strong commitment in the strategy if you get the opportunity to look at that. We are currently working with the Supplier Development Programme. We started working with them before we started to develop the strategy to understand how they could support us in the delivery of these aspirations, make sure that small and medium-sized enterprises, micro businesses, third sector organisations and supported businesses were aware of our requirements. We intend to work with the Supplier Development Programme and obviously maximise their existing processes to make sure that our requirements are publicised as widely as possible through the Supplier Development Programme's marketing and advertising methods. Obviously, we will continue to advertise all of our requirements on Public Contracts Scotland, as you would expect. We will expect contractors to publicise subcontract opportunities through Public Contracts Scotland, which is a very standard approach. There's nothing new in that, but we will be very proactive in that respect. We also intend to continue to maximise the use of lotting and lot limiting so that contractors can bid for part of a larger contract or a larger requirement. Lot limiting is extremely important in terms of making sure that a single supplier doesn't win all of the work, and we used that very successfully recently, and I'll come on to speak about that a bit later in this presentation. So we're going to be using the full provisions of the Public Contracts Scotland regulations to make sure that as much of our business is accessible to small, medium-sized enterprises, third sector organisations and supported businesses as we possibly can. That doesn't mean to say we will always award contracts to these organisations. Clearly, we can't predict the outcome of a procurement process, but we will do as much as we can to remove the barriers to participation for these types of organisations. I mentioned about Public Contracts Scotland. That's obviously our advertising portal that's used by every organisation in Scotland to advertise their planned procurements. We're currently working in the agency to develop our website, which means that we can be a bit more proactive in terms of advertising our forward plan of procurement activity. So if you've already looked at our website, you'll see that it's pretty good at the moment, but it will get better over the months. So I would encourage you all to continue to monitor that website regularly as we develop functionality that is of use to you or of interest to you as a supplier. And finally, on this slide, we have got a commitment to award contracts to supported businesses where possible. And a critical part of that is understanding the market capacity within supported businesses. And we obviously, there are two critical partners there. First of all, the Supplier Development Programme and BASE Scotland, the British Association of Supported Employers. And we will be working very, very closely with both of these organisations to understand more about what supported businesses can provide in Scotland. Okay, so now I want to talk to you a bit about what we actually did do and what a supported business is. So of supreme value to us is the Scottish Government Supported Business Framework. It's made it very, very easy for public sector organisations in Scotland to award contracts to supported business. So it effectively offers us a quick, compliant route to market. And a lot of you suppliers might be thinking, well, that's great, but I'm not a supported business. But I would encourage you to consider whether your business maybe could become a supported business, whether it can meet that two-part test in the procurement regulations. And I'll just talk a wee bit about that right now. So a supported business, for the purposes of the public procurement regulations, is a business where the main aim is the social and professional integration of disabled or disadvantaged persons, and where at least 30% of that business's employees are disabled or disadvantaged. If I can just speak a wee bit about the disadvantage element of that. So there is no recognised definition of disadvantage. most of you will be aware that we still follow the EU procurement regulations. The Public Contract Scotland regulations flow down from the EU regulations. Those regulations remain in place, they remain in force. So the definition of disadvantage has never been formally agreed. In terms of disadvantage, it is a broad category. It can be a person who lives in an area of multiple deprivation, using the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. It can be a person who is a care leaver. It can be a person who is an ex-offender and is trying to rehabilitate themselves. It could be a person who is a refugee, a person whose first language is not English, a person who is constrained by care responsibilities to help. There's a disadvantage to finding and retaining work. It can also include older employees who do not have a particularly relevant set of skills or qualifications. So I would ask you to consider whether that 30%, whether your organisation could meet that 30% threshold, because we have had quite a lot of success recently in trying to encourage organisations to consider whether they could meet that. There's one other part of the two-part test I think is really, really important to stress, and that is where the aim of the business has to be the social and professional integration of disabled and disadvantaged people. Usually we look to establish that through commitments in your website, through commitments in your articles of association, through targeted recruitment at disabled and disadvantaged individuals. But I would seriously encourage all of you to consider whether, with some adjustment, your organisation could meet that two-part test, which you would then be obliged to explain or to evidence to us as part of the procurement process. So moving on from that probably quite lengthy description of what a supported business is. Oh, one other thing on that, I think it's important to be aware that a supported business is a business who makes a profit and maybe another business that doesn't make a profit. So profit doesn't play a part on it. You can be a supported business if you're a private sector organisation. You can meet that two-part test and be considered a supported business if you are a third sector organisation. You can also meet that two-part test if you are a voluntary organisation. So it is sector agnostic. It's all about the operator and whether they aim to include disabled and disadvantaged people in society through their employment, through the services they provide, and whether they can meet that two-part test. So it's really important to remember that. So on the commitments and the strategy, we have committed to use the Scottish Government Supported Business Framework wherever appropriate. That framework is due to be relet at some point next year, but we will continue to work closely with Scottish Government to make sure that our needs are captured when they're considering the strategy for the relet of that framework. I've already stated that we will seek to award contracts to supported businesses as much as possible, and we'll also work with contractors who are not supported businesses to encourage them to include supported businesses as part of their supply chain where that makes sense, where there is capacity within the market. We will obviously encourage contractors as part of their sustainability offerings to look at contracting with supported businesses. And finally, on this slide, I've already mentioned that we will continue to work with the British Association for Supported Employment. We're currently doing that, and we will continue to do that as we develop our procurement function within the agency. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. I wanted to speak a bit about the work that we've done with supported businesses to date. So I've already explained about the framework, and I want to speak now about how we use the regulations to maximise the opportunity for supported businesses to access our business. So I spoke about our offices in Dundee and Glasgow. They needed to be fitted out, we needed furniture, we needed signs. And we looked at the supported business framework and we considered how we could use this and how we could maximise the framework. So in March 2020, we awarded a contract under the supported business framework to a company for signs, and that was Scotland's Bravest. Really successful contract, very good results from that award, and they were obviously delighted to have that opportunity to supply services to us. On a slightly bigger scale, earlier this year, you also used the framework to award a 2-year £2 million contract for furniture and associated products in the office. We were very mindful of the need to make sure that, given that delivery was to be in Dundee and Glasgow, there were 2 suppliers on the framework, one based in Dundee and one based in Glasgow. So we broke the contract down into lots, and we lot limited to make sure that no single supported business on the framework won all of the award. This turned out to be a really, really good decision. The strategy was successfully executed. What we were very keen to do was make sure that we did not apply lot limiting at any cost. So where there was going to be a 10% variance in the cost, and that was more expensive, we would then set aside lot limiting. Clearly, we have a commitment through our framework document. This is our corporate framework document, to deliver value for money. And while we're very keen to break down things and make sure that they're smaller and more accessible, we need to consider value for money. The outcome was a very successful award to 2 supported businesses, one in Glasgow and one in Dundee, for furniture, which was an excellent outcome, and it meant that the economic benefit of those awards was spread more widely than it would have been had we not lot limited. So a really successful outcome. We will obviously make sure that we continue to do that as much as possible in our proposed future procurements, regardless of whether we use supported businesses or not. We won't always use supported businesses, but when we're going out for other commodities like ICT, we will try to lot as much as possible to make them accessible to SMEs, and also lot limit to make sure that no one big contractor can sweep the board and win all of the lots. Yeah, this slide talks about our commitment to work with the Supplier Development Programme to help small, medium-sized enterprises. I've already explained briefly the work that we did with the Supplier Development Programme when we were developing our procurement strategy. We will continue to work with them. Very, very, very keen to understand more about the capacity of the Dundee, Perth, Kinross, Angus and further north, the capacities of businesses, not just supported businesses. Obviously, I am based in Glasgow and I have a good understanding of the market in Glasgow and the Central Belt. Dundee is slightly less known to me, so I've obviously made it very clear to the Supplier Development Programme that I perceive one of the benefits of membership of the programme is having a really good service from them in terms of what the market is like in Dundee and the north of Scotland, and what opportunities there are for us to consider market capability, market capacity when we are lotting requirements. So we'll be very active with the Supplier Development Programme in the months and years ahead to make sure that we lot and break down requirements as much as possible to provide suppliers local to Dundee and the surrounding local authority areas to bid for and win as much of our work as they possibly can. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we're attending this event today. We will attend future events, and hopefully the next time we will be able to meet face to face. But we see the Supplier Development Programme as a key partner in terms of helping us to understand more about the market capacity out with the Central Belt. And obviously that bottom line on the slide speaks about where these opportunities and subcontract opportunities will be publicised through the Supplier Development Programme's website. Okay, so I think we're now almost at the end of the slides. If we could move on. Yeah, so the next thing is about the Supplier Development Programme's sustainable model. Very, very aligned with the Scottish Government sustainable model and the power of procurement, good for businesses. Just want to say a wee bit about community benefits. The Procurement Reform Act obliges all public sector organisations who have contract opportunities of £4 million or more to specify what community benefits they would like the contractor to deliver. We will be looking to apply that at a much lower level in our contracting opportunities. So the Social Security Scotland as an organisation has made a commitment to seek community benefits for all regulated procurements. and for suppliers that is all procurements with a value of more than £50,000, which is fairly low. I appreciate that, but clearly any community benefit deliverable in a £50,000 requirement has to be proportionate and relevant. So we're not looking for a supplier to deliver £8,000 or £10,000 worth of community benefit through a £50,000 award. It's all about, very much about, making sure that the sustainable outcomes through our award decisions are actually delivered for the benefit. And it's actually good for businesses to be involved in community benefit offerings that our contracts oblige them to do. It's good for their employees to get involved in something that goes a wee bit beyond the narrow confines of the contractual deliverables. So we obviously will make sure that we, on that sustainable area, we will work very closely, I think, with the Dundee, Perth, Angus and Kinross councils to make sure that we identify opportunities for community benefit. We will obviously make sure that we're aligned with the sort of the economic development models that are in place, and we will make sure that any community benefits are relevant, they're proportionate, that they meet the needs of the community, and not just in the contract because we're obliged to tick a box. And we'll make sure that when we are managing contracts post-award, that the community benefits are delivered as stated in the contract documentation. So I think we now are on to our final slide. Yeah, so this gives you our contact details. If you want to speak to myself or any member of my team, feel free to drop us an email. That's our email address. And obviously, at the end of this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions. Several members of the Social Security Scotland procurement team are here today and obviously available to take questions. So thanks very much for your time, and I do hope you found that helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Grant. So I hope you found that video helpful. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Anything that I can't answer, I'm happy to take away. So please feel free to ask questions. Thank you. Okay, so we have a question here, and this person is asking, has all procurement moved over to Social Security Scotland, or is there still an element that will be managed by Scottish Government? So that's a good question, and thanks for raising that. The Social Security programme is obviously a core part of Scottish Government, and all buying to deliver the outcomes that the programme is seeking to deliver will continue to be managed by Scottish Procurement. That's the More Powers implementation team within Scottish Procurement. At the moment, while we build our capacity in the agency, I explained in the video that we're just about to start building up our capacity. We have a shared services agreement with the More Powers team, and they will do quite a lot of our operational procurement buying from over the next couple of years actually. But what they will do is buy in line with our strategy. So the commitments that I made in that video will be followed through by Scottish Procurement, and they will be delivered through the individual procurement strategies that they press on our behalf. So it's a really, really good question, and I hope that helps. I'll move on to the next question. We now have a question: how many contracts will you be putting out this year? Not 100% sure on that. We're working currently on our forward plan of procurement activity. There's about 35 requirements on that at the moment, but not all of them will go out this year. And the intention is to make sure that we publish that forward plan on our procurement webpage on the agency. So have a wee look, keep a lookout for it. We're doing the sort of final touches of it, and clearly we will share that forward plan with our shared service provider. But there's about 35 known requirements right now, and they vary from everything that you would expect an organisation of our size to look to buy, everything from ICT to marketing requirements. Currently in the early stages of looking at catering facilities within High Street and Agnes Husband House. But I would advise you to please have a look on our website, and it will be published in due course. And I hope that's helpful too. Next question is, we are a small company. Is there an opportunity to bid for a small part of a contract? Yes, there is actually. One of the things I didn't touch on in my presentation was the opportunity for small companies to form consortia bids and bid with other organisations as a consortia. Now, one of the key things that's really important in encouraging consortia bids is to make sure that you leave enough time before you approach the market, and that you do have that published forward plan of procurement activity, because it allows small companies to make linkages with larger companies, or just a number of small companies. They don't have to be larger. And it allows them the time to get together and consider whether they would be interested in bidding as a consortia. We absolutely welcome consortia bids. We always have done. It's a key commitment as part of our procurement strategy, and Scottish Government are similar. So yeah, have a look at the forward plan. Don't let the fact that you're a small company lock you out of our opportunities. Also have a look at our contract awards, because where we award contracts, there will be opportunities for smaller companies through the supply chain. So just keep a good eye on the forward plan. Keep a good eye on our Public Contracts Scotland website, where you'll see the awards we make. And if it's for a service or a requirement that's relative to your business, then make contact with a successful supplier. Make them aware that you can provide subcontract opportunities. So just keep your eye on what you're doing, and that will help small companies. And obviously attending things like today is important as well, if you're a small company, in terms of networking with similar suppliers. Okay, and the next question here is about what are some examples of community benefits you'll be asking small businesses to deliver as part of your contracts at Social Security Scotland. So a key part of the delivery of community benefits, particularly where it's a small value contract. So let's just say it's a contract between £50,000 and £100,000. The sort of things we ask for under contracts of that value are things like work placements. Are you able to give a week or a month's work experience to someone who's leaving school or someone who's leaving care? Are you able to maybe go into schools and speak about your organisation? Talk about how you can help provide work experience. Maybe if it's a slightly larger value requirement, we often ask small businesses to take on a modern apprentice for the duration of the contract. A lot of this is determined by the proportionality and relevance of the contract. Clearly, there isn't really much benefit in asking, well, there is benefit in asking a contractor to take on a modern apprentice, but only if it's a 6-month contract, it wouldn't be proportionate. So we look at the contract as a whole, we look at the value, we look at the services that contractor is delivering, and we consider how best could that supplier deliver some community benefit. We often, because of the community benefit, because of that £4 million threshold that I spoke about in my presentation, where it's a smaller value contract, we often look to the supplier and we ask the supplier to propose community benefits as part of their bid response. So quite often this is driven by suppliers rather than ourselves. Where we drive it is when it's above that £4 million threshold, and we will be very specific and very directive about the type of community benefit we would like you to deliver, and you'll be contractually obliged to deliver under the contract. And there we very much focus on modern apprenticeships, work placements, and we ask suppliers to focus and target their recruitment on either people who are disabled, disadvantaged. We often ask them to target the